we can go into our review now. Are you ready to talk Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire?
Let's do it.
All right, awesome. So, as is customary on the podcast, we're going to do a non-spoiler review followed by a spoiler review for Godzilla X Kong. To switch over to spoiler review, I will play a clip from the trailer. Check the show notes for timestamps to find ways to navigate around all of that. Those show notes are at obsessiveviewer.com/OV422 and in your details or notes section of your podcast app. So here we go. Godzilla X Kong premiered in theaters March 29th. The premise, according to IMDb, is two ancient titans, Godzilla and Kong, clash in an epic battle as humans unravel their intertwined origins in connection to Skull Island's mysteries. Director was Adam Wingard, and writers were Terry Rossio, Simon Barrett, and Jeremy Slater. The movie stars Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, Dan Stevens, Kaylee Hottle, Alex Ferns, and Fala Chen. Now, Brent, before we get into our non-spoiler review, I just want to get your read on the MonsterVerse currently. So we've got Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Monarch Legacy of Monsters. How many of these have you seen, and what's your position on it before going into Godzilla X Kong?
I've seen all 5. I believe Godzilla came out on my 25th birthday.
Nice.
So saw that in theater. I think I've seen all of them in theaters except Godzilla versus Kong, because that was 2021 and it premiered on Max. So I saw it there. But yeah, I think all the other ones I've seen in theaters. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I think it's ambitious. I mean, I sort of, looking back now, I have respect for what they tried to do in terms of the directors they tried to get for like Godzilla and Kong Skull Island and King of the Monsters. King of the Monsters is my favorite of the 5. I am not nearly as much of a Godzilla head as our friend Evan Dossi, of course,
right?
Who is by far the biggest Godzilla person that I know,
by large margin.
And it's not even close. And I can't even think of a number 2. So of the 5, I feel like that's the one that, I mean, as much as I could say got Godzilla right, but at least I think it got like the monster movie formula probably best of the 5 movies.
This is King of the Monsters?
King of the Monsters, okay. Yeah, which is technically the second like Godzilla movie in the MonsterVerse, and it's a standalone. Kong doesn't really have anything to do with that. There's I think a Monarch tie-in, but that's really it. But it's pretty much just him kind of going against the different titans, and it's a big kind of monster mash, but it's a lot of fun. I think that's the one that sort of I don't know. I think Michael Dougherty, I think, just got the formula right for that. And I mean, I looked back at the cast of that. The cast in that movie is insane. Even people that aren't in it very much. It's like insane how many big names they got for that movie. That is still like, it's still a Godzilla movie. So I mean, let's face it. Like, some people typically are coming there for the human characters.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. Yeah, that's the one with Vera Farmiga. Yeah,
Charles Dance, I think, is the bad guy, and
that's right.
like Sally Hawkins is. I mean, it's just like crazy, like just the amount of people. I mean, you could say, I mean, I did in my review, like overqualified cast for sure. So yeah. But anyway, so yeah, overall, I would say I generally like it. I think it's an experiment in kind of what a monster movie franchise can be, I think.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I'm not too hot on all the movies, really. And I should ask, did you ever see Monarch on Apple TV Plus?
I have not seen Monarch, and I think there is an animated series on Netflix about Skull Island that I have not seen either.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen all the movies. I haven't seen Monarch. I've been pretty hot and cold on this franchise. I do like Godzilla as a property. I really need to get back into watching the Criterion collection I have of it, um, but I really like Godzilla. These movies just feel very inferior to the Godzilla movies that I've seen. But I've kind of turned a corner. It's interesting because the first Godzilla of this iteration of it came out in 2014, and then we got Kong Skull Island in 2017, and then King of the Monsters 2019, and Godzilla versus Kong in 2021. What I found myself thinking while rewatching Godzilla versus Kong, like I purposely rewatched Godzilla versus Kong like immediately before going to the theater because I'm so like I've seen these movies, but I'm not as invested in the movies. Like I don't remember much of the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like they're big spectacles, but they don't leave a strong impression. But when rewatching Godzilla versus Kong, I was just like, it's interesting that here over the last 4 or 5 years or so, there has been a shift in blockbuster filmmaking and big tentpole releases in that comic book movies have waned considerably. And like I have always been like an MCU stan. Like those are movies that I am very very much in get a lot of enjoyment out of. But since Endgame, I don't like my interest has waned considerably.
Mm-hmm.
So there is like this void with me with big spectacle, sci-fi leaning, big blockbuster spectacles. And when rewatching Godzilla versus Kong, I was like, yeah, I'm kind of into this like more so than I was before, like when I first saw it, because it is filling that void. Unfortunately, like you kind of alluded to, the human characters don't really do much. Like the human characters in this franchise are kind of not that interesting ever. And
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of the failure of the franchise for me. But in terms of spectacle, like I was surprised at how much I really liked Godzilla versus Kong. Yeah, so I was primed to be lukewarm on Godzilla X Kong. um, yeah. So do you want to get into our non-spoiler review for Godzilla X Kong?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So yeah, I how did you I'll get us kicked off if you don't mind. This in kind of an extension of that thing, that word salad I just said about the MCU and everything, is that, and I'm not someone who likes to make this kind of critique or anything, but the thing that I really like about Godzilla versus Kong and Godzilla X Kong is that they're both just shy of 2 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really interesting and really telling of how they are approaching these movies, because you don't need like a big 2.5 pushing 3 hour movie when you're noticeably not diving into much beneath the surface in terms of the human characters or the backstory. Um, and like, and I shouldn't say that because in Godzilla X Kong they do dive into that a little bit, but it for me it was more showing why they don't usually dive into that, because it was very kind of boring. And that's kind of my transition into saying that I thought that the first hour and a half of this movie was kind of a slog. There was some good stuff here and there, but it really kind of tried my patience. And then when we got to the big climactic battle sequence, it really felt like it didn't pay off the boredom I had in the first couple acts. That's kind of like my blanket statement about Godzilla X Kong. How'd you feel about the movie and non spoilers?
Yeah, I liked it a little more than Godzilla versus Kong, but I
Nice.
still don't think it's really. It's just not up to where. It's just not. This and Godzilla versus Kong just aren't as good as they could be. I think this is
Yeah.
the experiment that they're sort of trying in terms of just like team up cinema, which of course, like the
Mhm.
MCU influences everything, and there's always
Yeah.
universes and cinema, and that's fine, and like there's nothing wrong with that. But fundamentally, I just don't really think that. I'm not saying that Godzilla and Kong can't be in a movie together. I just don't. I think they've
Right.
tried twice and it hasn't quite worked either time.
Yeah.
What I said in my Godzilla versus Kong review, I actually feel even more vindicated watching this movie, watching Godzilla X Kong, because I had said that they needed to do another Kong movie, another standalone Kong movie, to make their kind of universes make sense together. And I think for me, like Godzilla versus Kong is just sort of like, I don't really think they allow those to mesh, and it's very much a Ballistic X versus Sever sort of situation where it's not really X versus Sever for a lot of that movie, and same for like Godzilla versus Kong. It's Godzilla and Kong versus Mechagodzilla. Spoiler alert for Godzilla versus Kong. You know, towards the end, it's like, oh, okay, they have their differences, and even in Godzilla X Kong, they still fight. But it's, you know, something brings them together, which we get into spoilers. But regardless, I honestly still think that, like, after King of the Monsters, they should have done a Kong standalone. And what this is basically that the structure of Godzilla X Kong is, you know, you have the humans, they're doing their thing. You have Godzilla, he's doing his thing. And then you have Kong and he's doing his thing. Now, they're not equal time. It's not equal time given to each segment. But the Kong stuff in Godzilla X Kong, I thought, was by far the most interesting of the three. I think it's the most like interesting storytelling that they're doing, and it's with apes. I mean, it's with ape characters. I actually haven't seen any of the new Planet of the Apes movies, but I gathered that that's probably what those movies are like the Kong aspect of this movie, with which we'll talk about more. But that was my favorite part of Godzilla, you know, X Kong. So again, I come back to, like, I wish they had done this. I wish they had done this back in like 21. And I think it would make putting those two characters, they would make that make more sense. And again, I just don't think it justifies like bringing them together. And again, Adam Wingard's the one who directed these two. I don't think he has that knack for juggling these stories on this level.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. And that is such a good point about there needing to be a Kong movie in between these last two movies, because the first half of this movie basically is a Kong movie. And like the way that Godzilla versus Kong ends, it ends in such a way that like it leaves it open for a Kong standalone movie. Like it's right there, Kong, Hollow Earth. Like you have the movie right there. The tagline now is like, learn how he got a toothache.
Eating too much candy.
Like, it's basically an inside. His hands look like this, so my hands can look like that.
Exactly. It's the tagline.
But like I was invested in that, and I thought it was interesting in this movie. But you have like so much more focus on Kong, and then you get like basically interstitials of Godzilla on like his own little road trip going to get like radiation for, you know, purposes that happen in the third act. And like the balance of that doesn't work for me, like you kind of said. But also I would have liked a standalone Kong movie, but I would have liked a standalone Kong movie not directed by Adam Wingard, because I feel like there was, and this could have been just me, a noticeable like misinterpretation of the scale of Kong and the other apes in the movie. Like there was, maybe it's because so much of it took place in Hollow Earth and the subterranean realm and what have you. But like, I never really latched on to what, like how big he is and how big these creatures are. And that kind of just felt a little bit like it just lacked an immersion for me that I would have liked to have in this movie.
Like if you go back to Skull Island, like that's a movie where it is the Kong that we would think of that is batting down helicopters. And like there's that, you know, Apocalypse Now homage of, you know, him in front of like the sunset. And like, you're right, there's so much more scale and like whatever, like magnitude, all of his actions were in this. It's in Hollow Earth, which that's the whole thing about Hollow Earth is like, I can't get the sense of like, if it's supposed to be like magical. And but regardless,
Yeah.
it's like you're right. Like the scale is totally off. Like the villain in this movie, we'll talk about is like
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like he should put it. He would stand a chance against Kong
Oh, no,
in
not
terms
at
of his
all.
size, but like
Yeah.
he does, and yeah, he has some help, but like it
Mhm.
physically, it just makes no sense proportion wise. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and even, like, his introduction was, like, in a pretty darkly lit set, and, like, that also kind of muddied the scale and how we perceive the size of these creatures. Um, and it just equaled a bad time for me. Like, it really kinda took me out of the movie several times, and it's funny because I came into this movie wanting to be, like, invested in it and, like, coming at it with like a newfound or renewed appreciation for Godzilla X Kong, thinking like, man, okay, this is gonna be cool. Like I forgot that I was that interested in the last movie. And another reason why I was interested in that last movie that I found just sorely missing in this was the like color palette of Godzilla versus Kong. It's very vibrant and colorful,
Hmm.
and like it was gorgeous. And like here we get a lot of foliage and like not a lot of colorful, like mesmerizing cinematography in this, and that was a huge letdown for me.
I
Aside
almost
from
mentioned this in my
yeah,
review. Sorry, go ahead.
nice. I was gonna say aside from Dan Stevens
Hawaiian shirts. Yeah.
Hawaiian shirts, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, you almost said that in your
I
review.
was going to say this in my review, but I didn't want it to come across since I was already giving a negative review of like,
Mm.
oh, like film critic is pushing up his glasses on his nose talking about cinematography. But I am telling you, I saw this in IMAX 2D, I should say, which
Mm.
for some reason this is being released in 3D and
Oh
IMAX
yeah,
3D. No idea why they're still doing that. Avatar did it
me
15
neither.
years ago. We're still paying for it.
Yeah.
So regardless, I saw it in IMAX 2D, which I understand like is should be pretty large like presentation, should be hypothetically like the highest quality like picture.
Right.
For some reason, the cinematography in this movie for large stretches, particularly when they're shooting like the humans, when it's actually stuff that's actually there on set,
Yeah.
is so the lens that they're using or something is so the edges are extremely blurry, where it's like
Oh.
really annoying. And so they'll shift focus from one character to the other in the background, foreground, something like that, and it's like
Mhm.
I swear to God, it's like literally like almost nauseating. And I don't know why. I assume that's a stylistic choice. Don't really know.
Mhm.
But I did not enjoy it. And what I don't know is if that had to do with making the 3D like pop, if that's part of the choice.
Oh.
I don't know. I can't say. But
Huh.
this is the same DP that shot Godzilla versus Kong,
Mm.
and like the Mummy. So like I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
he's just like I don't know. Maybe they're going for some kind of like blockbuster look that I don't really understand. But all I can say is
Yeah.
like I noticed this time and I did not like it. So whatever they're
Yeah.
doing with, and again, I'm speaking mainly of the scenes, pretty much of the scenes of something that's like the human stuff, because like
Mhm.
it doesn't affect that. That's not how anything is with any like the CG.
Right.
And I'll say the visual
Yeah.
effects in this I thought were great.
Mhm.
As far as I can tell, I thought they were pretty solid. I agree with you about the scale. I do agree there,
Mhm.
but I would say like everything that looks cool is supposed to look cool, for
Yeah.
lack of a better way of putting it. At least
It
I thought so.
y Yeah, I'll agree with you there, and there's also a lot of different, like, creatures and designs and that, which is it's fine. That's where I saw some, like, little blemishes of CGI there, but, um, it's and I'm gonna kinda speak a little bit out of my scope in that, like, I know that with big blockbuster CGI fests like this, there is the ever-present volume,
Hmm.
that that Marvel Studios just uses as a crutch. And like like in moments in this movie where we see like big wide vistas of Hollow Earth or the subterranean realm and like the different locations, I thought like, it's noticeable. It's still noticeable that this is all just on like the volume, but like I don't mind it. Like here, it's when it's in like the freaking quantum realm, the quantum realm, the quantum realm,
Yeah.
in Ant-Man that I'm like, okay, this is absurdly bad looking, and in Thor, Love and Thunder too. But like here, I'm like, this is cool. Like it actually is. It's serviceable, but still noticeable. So all that to say, I didn't mind the visual effects all that much, aside from the noticeable absence of the vibrant colors of Godzilla versus Kong, which were sorely missed, because this just felt more kind of basic, more like
Yeah.
regular blockbuster stuff. Yeah. Uh, how did you feel about the human characters in this movie? I like in particular the return of Rebecca Hall and Kayla Hottle, and also Brian Tyree Henry, and the new inclusion of Dan Stevens.
Dan Stevens. Yeah, Dan Stevens was my favorite of the human bunch. I think he's introduced, I think, to Kiss or something like that. That needle drops in this movie are, again, it's like MCU. It's like I just assume that's just, I can't even eye roll about it anymore, because so many movies do this kind of thing
Yeah.
that I'm just like, this has a few Lover Boys, another one.
Yeah.
They do Day After Day is in later on this movie, the Badfinger tune. Anyway, there's like all these name drops. Anyway, he's like in this helicopter, and it's like I Was Made for Loving You, the Kiss song or whatever.
Yeah.
And like he's having a good time. And I did
Yeah.
like that. I will say that Wingard connection, I like him being in The Guest, 10 years ago, which is Wingard's one of his earlier movies.
I'm an idiot and didn't even make that connection, really.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just like, I kind of like that. Again, I'll take these movies. It's like, I'll take any sort of bits of personality. I'll take anything. I'll take crumbs, So like even some kind of connection there, and like he's having fun. Like he's sort of like a Zen figure a little bit. When they get down to Hollow Earth, he lets a mosquito bite him because he's like, hey man, so he can like lay his egg. It's stuff like that. It's just like, that's so stupid. I mean, whatever. That's my perspective. But anyway, regardless, he's this sort of like Zen vet to the monsters, and I think that's a fun character. That's a fun addition. So I was cool with that. Brian Tyree Henry, I think, take it or leave it. I think he's a strong actor, of course. I don't really. He's a conspiracy podcaster, so whatever, he's sort of comic relief. I think they tried to take him a little more seriously in this movie because he has a little more to do, but that's whatever. I thought the stuff with Rebecca Hall and what was her name? Kaylee Hottle. You said the deaf girl who's she like communes with Skull Island, and then with like the Eevee tribe and stuff. Yeah, I think they're fine characters. I thought they were good in Godzilla versus Kong. I like their relationship because that's a carryover from Skull Island, and like Rebecca Hall's character is like her kind of surrogate mom. And I still like their characters this time around. The dialogue is so bad between them. Like, and that really goes for any of the human characters in this. It's just like, what do they do that like thing? It's like, I'm with you, you're with me. And it's like, okay, like there's just nothing engaging about any of this dialogue.
Right.
And again, I know these sound like stupid complaints for like a monster movie, but like, I'm telling you, you can see the best of them, and there's good stuff in this realm, even in writing and how you set up the circumstances. I mean, this stuff matters, whether people think it does or not, when you're seeing a movie like this. So yeah, I mean, again, if I can say anything, I suppose that I liked, actually, in comparison to Godzilla versus Kong, where like Kyle Chandler shows up for like 4 seconds. He's like laughably small a role in that movie. He's a holdover from King of the Monsters in that movie. Here, like they have a more streamlined cast, which I think actually probably helped the budget. So I honestly think that's fine. Quite frankly, I think you only really need about 4 or 5 people to go down to Hollow Earth and do the thing.
Totally. Yeah.
And I don't think it's a problem with the cast. I really do just think it's a problem with just none of the writing's good in this movie. I mean, let's just call it what it is.
Absolutely. So. And like, you don't need deep, rich characters for the humans, because that's not what audiences are coming to. And like, also, as evidenced by Godzilla -1, Toho's doing the character, like the human character stuff in circles, like around what Warner
Yeah,
Brothers and
that didn't
Legendary are
have a
doing.
cast that was like, oh, all these big A-list stars. I
Yeah,
mean, even in
yeah,
Japan, it's like that's not the
right,
point of that movie. But yeah, it's still
exactly.
full of really strong performances. So,
Yeah, I
yeah, I mean, if anything, I guess I'm glad that this is such a terrible, cynical thing to say. But like, I'm glad it saved him some money. I mean, to be
mhm,
honest, like, you don't like. That's why I kind of like King of the Monsters. I mean, I did
mhm,
like that in a way, it's such a weird thing to say, like, it's fun to see so many familiar faces in a movie like that.
yeah,
But all that to say, like, you don't need it for this sort of movie
no,
either. And it's sort of take it or leave it for me with Godzilla, X Kong this time around.
yeah. I agree, and I just wish that the actual Godzilla and Kong stuff were what was better, like better demonstrated, and not as pushed aside, not pushed aside, but as competing with the human stories. Because, like, yeah, the like you said, it is pretty much streamlined because we have a very small group of characters. But I still felt like the writing for them was lacking, and it was really trying my patience. Brian Tyree Henry, I think, was better than he was in Godzilla versus Kong because it is a little bit more taking it a little bit more serious, but he's not necessarily like the punchline of the movie, like the fact that he's a podcaster or has any kind of internet relativity uh
Relevance.
relevance. There you go. Thank you. um any kind of internet relevance, like that's not the punchline of his character. The punchline
Yeah.
is him reacting to things and trying to film things, and like there are little quips here and there. Like there's one where he's hurriedly talking to Rebecca Hall and saying, like, yeah, this is the stuff and everything. I had to pull in a lot of favors from my Discord server. And I was like, that's a very solid joke. I
Mhm.
liked that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but the rest of the human element of the show of the movie just kind of felt a little bit lacking to me, and more a vessel for um the very long road to get to the setup to the final battle scene. Um which
Yeah, and
felt a little
Godzilla
bit,
is
yeah.
not in this all that much. I mean, he's
He's not.
credited first in the
Yeah.
title, and he
Yeah.
really does three main things.
Mhm. Yeah, he does. He does. And like that is also probably why it's not as colorful and unique and cool looking as Godzilla versus Kong, cuz we get some cool color stuff with him, but like even when we'll talk about that in spoilers. But anyway, do
Yeah.
you want to kind of dive into spoilers? I
Yeah.
know we're going a little bit over our
Let's go
time.
for it.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So we're going to go into spoilers for Godzilla X Kong. Before we do that, Brent, what did you rate it on Letterboxd, and where can people find you online and your reviews?
I gave this 2.5 out of 5. I do think it's technically, a bit of a step up from Godzilla versus Kong, but I still just, yeah, I'm kind of underwhelmed by these two specific ones. I think that
Mhm.
honestly, King of the Monsters, like, I probably should have rated that a little higher because, like, in hindsight, it feels like that movie, like, but again, that's standalone, so it's sort of a
Yeah.
different thing. But I think they still have a ways to go in figuring out how all of these creatures can really play together. But slightly better than. I mean, if you like Godzilla versus Kong, you'll almost certainly like this. I
Oh
would say
yeah.
that. So
Yeah. I'll agree with you there. I rated it slightly lower than you. I rated it 2 stars. Yeah, just the road to the finale was too cumbersome, and it had a lot of things that just didn't really work all that well for me, which I'll talk about in spoilers. One in particular that just kind of felt a little bit, whatever. But um as far as the humans are concerned, like there were some solid stuff there. Dan Stevens definitely stands out as he is the more just happy-go-lucky, or the fun character. Um, and like that also felt a little tropey to me. So that felt also a little bit like they didn't try hard enough with that. But he's having a blast, which I really appreciate because I like Dan Stevens.
yeah.
But yeah, but I gave it 2 stars. Yeah, and where can people find you online?
Yeah, awakeinthedark.com is the best way. That has all my written work, podcast stuff, and all the social media stuff.
Nice. All right. Well, we are going to go into spoilers for Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. If you want to navigate away from that, to go to the secondary review, check the show notes for the timestamps to navigate around that. Those can also be found at obsessiveviewer.com/OV422. Now I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. When we come back, we're going to be spoiling Godzilla X Kong.
For centuries, there was harmony. The Titans were the guardians of nature, and the great apes became the protectors of humanity.
All right, so spoilers on for Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, and obviously the big thing that we need to discuss is King Kong's dental work. How did you feel about that? And also the themes of bullying that are explored in this with the Scar King,
Yeah,
laughing derisively at
that is
our
dental
Kong.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so that whole thing, like the whole thing in the Hollow Earth, I do think is interesting. I think Scar King is a terrible name for a villain. Sorry if that's canon to Kong. I mean, whatever. Either way, I don't care if that's a character name that goes back 50, 60 years. It's a bad character name, regardless. Right. I think that's an interesting character. I thought his build, like he looks a lot lankier. Like he looks kind of like I don't know. He doesn't seem like he would put up an actual fight with Kong. What he's able to do with Shimo and the Arctic Blast and everything hurts his arm. Like, I get that. But like even before, like it's kind of like Batman and Joker in Dark Knight. It's like, it seems like 2 punches and the Joker will be like totally done. So anyway, so this is where I was kind of getting the Planet of the Apes stuff. And again, I have not seen these new movies, but I, just familiar just generally with them in the zeitgeist. And I really like the way Scar King is presented with the kind of the bones that are almost like his regalia. It's almost like a sash, like you'd see on a general. So I thought that was super cool. And then the way he's able to use it, like is a whip almost. And then I know that control-y psychic skull for or crystal or whatever for Shimo, whatever he's doing to controls it with pain is all we really hear about that. So that whole thing was cool. I just like the stuff with like the mini Kong. I looked up his name from my review, but I forget what it was. It's something cutesy. But they have like that's basically what it is. There's some other name for it. Ends with O. It's the short name. But anyway, regardless, like it's sort of like, at first, like he's kind of looking out for the other apes. And then like there's that scene, of course, where he like beats the other apes with the mini Kong, which is awesome. And then like they have a I don't want to say reluctant friendship, but I think Mini Kong's someone related to him dies, and Kong tries to avenge that. So they're kind of buddies from there on and all that. So that's fun too. Like, anyway, like that's the stuff I engaged with the most, better or worse, is like all of the ape stuff. And I said in my review too, like, I don't know, like, that's why I thought the visual effects stood out to me. Like, they're pretty expressive. Where again, I haven't seen these new Planet of the Apes movies, but like it seemed like, I don't know if they did mocap or if it's just totally CG, but either way, I felt like, they're telling a story with their faces. And so anyway, I liked that stuff the most. I thought those were the most, like, Scar King, Mini Kong, all that stuff. Like, they to me were more interesting than pretty much any of the human characters, anything they were doing.
Oh yeah, totally. Like the emotive aspect of the creature characters in this was very solid, and I would be very curious to hear your thoughts on what's on this after you see, like, if you plan on going back and seeing the more recent Planet of the Apes movies, because those kind of like spearheaded that. And I don't know, by the way, it's Zuko.
Zuko,
but yeah, it was pretty. The thing that I appreciate about that is the way that they went for conveying the not dialogue, but conveying the emotions and the interactions between the apes through just body language. Like,
Right.
they didn't do a crutch of like having subtitles or anything, because like in the Planet of the Apes movies, they talk, like they speak
Right.
English.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I do give this movie credit for basically believing in us as the audience to be able to pick up what they were putting down non-verbally, which I think that is a feather in the cap of the movie. Even if that whole segment, like the majority of the movie, was stuff that didn't really resonate with me all that much, I was glad that I could at least follow it and make that determination that it doesn't work for me, rather than being kind of lost in the shuffle or being like just completely disengaged by it. So I do think it's a feather in their cap for that, a feather in their mocap. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I kind of say, like, I mean, how much did Adam Wingard really have to do with like the storytelling decisions?
Right.
That's so I kind of have to credit like the VFX. I think all the people that worked
Mhm.
specifically on those scenes. Of course, any of the stuff with Godzilla with Destroyer or Mothra. I mean, there's a whole bunch of visual effects here that are quite
Oh,
wonderful.
yeah.
But I think specifically that aspect that kept me in the movie pathos wise for like a lot of it. So.
Mhm.
So yeah, credit to them. And again,
Right.
again, another reason why I said earlier, like, why can't we get a whole Kong movie of this?
Yeah.
Like why can't we just have done that in 21 instead
Oh,
of
yeah.
Godzilla versus Kong? Do one other, like, just do a standalone Kong thing and then have your meetup. And then
Mhm.
anyway, and maybe it never would have worked. Maybe the
Absolutely.
meetup thing, because I don't think either of these have really worked in terms of the Godzilla with Kong against Kong, any of that stuff. I don't really
Yeah.
think it's worked, but at least it would have been nice to get one more standalone Kong movie, because I did like Skull
Oh,
Island.
totally. No, me
Um,
too.
so anyway,
Yeah. I do think that the meetup between them, like the movie has this weird thing where it feels like it is just like, it sets it up as like, okay, well, if Kong comes back from Hollow Earth, that could start like a massive war between these two, which, yeah, that's compelling, that's interesting. But it's also like, now there's an even bigger threat that doesn't look that big, but there's an even bigger threat that we need Godzilla and Kong to team up. And like, that in and of itself wasn't compelling enough for me. Even with Godzilla going and getting all the radiation to prepare for battle or whatever, like none of that really, that just felt like the biggest slog. However, I will say that I think Godzilla sleeping in the Coliseum was freaking adorable. Like,
yeah, I was
that
thinking of
was
that
great.
too. How it's
Yeah.
said of cats, like that, or
Mhm.
the of lions or whatever, tigers, when
Mhm.
they do something in nature that's like a domesticated cat. People
Yeah.
say tigers are just big kitties.
Mhm.
That even though Godzilla isn't, it just like reminded me, like Godzilla. It reminded that line, and it's like Godzilla is just a big kitty when he was
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
curling up in the Coliseum. And I have family actually in Rome right now,
Oh,
so
wow.
I should have texted them and been like, get out, Godzilla is there.
Nice.
So maybe if they don't try to go in the Coliseum, maybe they'll be okay.
Yeah.
But regardless, I agree with you. I mean, there's stuff with Godzilla that works, but I still
Mhm.
think it's all the stuff with Shimo. It's all shoehorned. Like it's
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
why
yeah.
King of the Monsters works for me again, because it's standalone. It's a kaiju movie. Like they're
Mhm.
not trying to shoehorn really any Kong tribal anything with that. It's just a
Yeah.
kaiju movie, and it's, I think, quite good as that. But they still just, again, like they're like kind of over 2 on trying to merge these worlds,
Mhm.
and it's what they wanted to build. They wanted to do the MCU thing and have a
Yeah.
crossover. And sorry, crossovers don't always work. Justice League isn't always a good movie. Sorry.
Right.
you
Totally,
know.
totally. And like, that was another thing I kept thinking about too, is that for all of the movies in this franchise now and this TV show, like while watching Godzilla versus Kong, I found myself, because it had been years since I'd seen the other ones, I kept thinking like, man, if the groundwork of this movie, of this franchise, like the whole Monarch thing and the Apex whatever cybernetics or whatever, if any of that was compelling, I would be like all in. I would be really into it. but it just seems like it's a little bit piecemeal together. And then in this movie, you don't necessarily abandon that, but you have instead the Iwi tribe and their connection with Jaya, which I wasn't totally against, because I appreciated how they mirrored Jaya's story with Kong's, and how they're both like looking for home, and they're lost, and they're the last of their people, but they also found a version of their people. And what kind of sucks about it is that it just kind of feels like a little bit like it doesn't really conclude that in a satisfactory way.
And it's just a thing
Yeah.
where Wingard just does not. It's just sort of lip service. Like, he wants to sort of
Yes.
tell all this stuff, but it's not really about like bringing it together to be a meaningful story. It's just sort of throwing all this stuff out there. And that's why, I mean, look, I've liked some stuff Adam Wingard has done in the past. I love You're Next, and I think The Guest is really solid, kind of genre mashup sort of thing. But I don't know, since then, it just really feels like he has not found his footing, like, as a storyteller, quite frankly. So I don't know. I mean, I think moving forward, I have to say, I kind of hope they move past Wingard. I mean, you look at the directors. I mean, you look like Gareth Edwards and Jordan Voight Roberts, and Michael Dougherty, especially with King of the Monsters. Like, say what you will about those movies, but like, they have intent to them in terms of like the storytelling sort of knack to them. And I think in Wingard, they were maybe just like, well, the Russos aren't good directors either, and they made Infinity War and Endgame, so just figure it out. And he's like, oh, of course I can do that. I love Godzilla. It's like,
sure,
that's not the way directors work. It's not the way directing should work anyway. Regardless, it's just without comparisons to MCU even. It's just, I think, quite frankly, they just need to have someone. They need to back someone that can give these stories that just sort of oomph, whether that's dialogue or just purpose, just something that's not just like, oh, well, monsters are going to fight in the third act, doesn't matter what happens before that. It's like, it does though, like it does. So
absolutely. And like, that's why I say, like, I do like the kind of mirroring of Jaya and Kong, but like, there's no follow through. It is all, like you said, lip service. It's basically just like, oh, we'll have this be a big emotional moment at the end when Rebecca Hall is ready to give up her daughter to this subterranean group of people, just for the fact that like they're her people. Like, it's just so, it feels very what is the opposite of like heavy-handed? Like, it feels very basic and rudimentary.
It's perfunctory. I mean, they don't know. I mean, they're kind of, and again, these are all characters that are carried over. So hypothetically, like, they should already have that development, and it's still just and there's just no real interest in furthering that story with them. It's just, like I said, that's kind of my hope for these, is whether they do Godzilla Kong mashup again, that's fine, but just have someone that can actually put these two worlds together in a way that makes sense, because they just don't for me in this one and Godzilla versus Kong.
I agree. We're on the same page there. Final thoughts. What did you think of the very like immediate Deus Ex Machina of the arm thing?
The beast beast glove or whatever, right? The acronym that didn't even say in the movie. It was cute. Remind me of Pacific Rim with the elbow rockets and stuff. So again, like, that's kind of a kaiju thing. So like, again, it's whatever. Like, I think on the next try, they'll who knows, they'll get some of that stuff right and kind of make it make sense. Again, I watched a ton of promos for this because I was watching March Madness this past weekend, and they advertised the crap out of this movie. And like, it's obvious, like, we know that they're gonna, like, we know the third act, we know what to expect, and it is fun. And that's all they're gonna advertise, of course, and that's fine. But again, I don't think it's too much to ask more of these movies.
Right. Totally agree. Any final thoughts on Godzilla X Kong equals friendship?
No, I don't think so. I think you could do worse with monster movies, but again,
Yeah.
like I said, you could do better.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I agree. The final thing I'll say is, and I forgot to mention it before, is the pilot thing, like him getting eaten by a tree, like that was fun for Brian Tyree Henry's reaction, but like the whole time I was thinking like, oh wow, this is wild because like now they don't have a way to get back, and it's like that's not a part of the movie at all. Like it's just like Dan Stevens flies the thing and it's all set. I'm like, you could have had like a compelling like human element to it and have that be a bit of propulsive tension, but they didn't. They left
oh
it
my
in the
God, I
movie.
do have one other thing to say because I have a
Mm.
diseased brain. So there's that sequence of like 3 minutes where the pilot gets eaten like very
Mhm.
quickly. And then I think Brian Tyree Henry, I don't remember the exact details. He kind of freaks out. And then Dan
Yeah.
Stevens like kind of hugs him in his like Zen way or whatever. And
Mhm.
the story beats reminded me of Tropic Thunder. I don't think it's intentional at all. But it did remind me of like, what do you mean, you people? You know, like, because it doesn't
Nice.
have anything to do with that in the movie, but just the
Mhm.
sequence of events where in Tropic Thunder, Steve Coogan's character like lands on the mine or whatever, and then they have to figure out what they're doing, and
Right.
then like, and it's so stupid. I shouldn't even have mentioned that, but I just was thinking of it, and then I was thinking, uh, I don't know. I was thinking that Dan Stevens was going to start quoting the theme song from the Jeffersons.
Yeah.
No idea why I thought of
Jeez.
any of this. There is no chance Adam Wingard was trying to reference
Oh no.
that movie, but that's my last thing to say. Has
Nice.
nothing to do with anything.
Nice. Well, that will do it for our review of Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. Once again, you can find Brent's work on awakeinthedark.com. Also, all the socials. I have links in the show notes, of course, and follow him on Letterboxd, whatever his Letterboxd username is.
It's just Awake
You
in
have
the
it?
Dark for
Awake in the Dark.
Letterbox. Yep.
There we go. But once again, all that's in the show notes of the episode. Brent, thank you so much for joining me for this review. Any parting thoughts before you leave and leave me to my secondary review of Upgraded?
Now you're going to get an upgrade here in the second half. So
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah, don't butter them up too much because I don't know how much I'm going to have to say about this movie. um but not that it's bad, but I'll get to it. You guys will hear it. So anyway, thank you so much, Brent. We'll bid adieu to you, and we are going to go into my secondary review here momentarily.